The story of One Piece doesn't begin with pirates, and well, contrary to popular belief, it begins years ago, thousands of years ago, in a world where civilizations were far more advanced than anything residing in the present. A world seemingly consisting of endless land with a multitude of different races and ways of life, compared to the present world almost made up entirely out of water, with very few races and a severe lack of technology, if any at all. The world in the past seemed to even possess mysterious gods and devils, whose names are only spoken of in legend and only pictured in ancient murals. This may seem quite shocking, as One Piece, as many know it, is bright, is adventurous, even hopeful, but its historic roots paint a far darker and terrifying picture. There are a lot of questions to be asked, like why did the world change so drastically compared to the past? Why did the technology back then completely supersede anything of the present? What happened to these ancient kingdoms and civilizations that are nowhere to exist, along with the ancient races who inhabited them, who have seemed to have disappeared off the earth entirely? And what of the gods and devils pictured in these murals and spoken of in myth? But arguably, the most terrifying question to ask is what could have happened for the world to end up like this? But in order to really understand or comprehend any of this at all, we need to go, in this case, all the way forward to the future. On the surface, One Piece may seem like a simple story where pirates sail the seas, causing chaos everywhere they go, with the Marines, a branch of the world's government, directly opposing these pirates for the crimes they commit. There seems to be two main ideologies in the present world of One Piece, one of which, the majority, is that the world government is a good force and continues to uphold justice against the pirates and criminals alike. And the other ideology, which can only really be attained through personal experiences, is that the world government is evil, and horrifically so, inspiring pirates and revolutionaries alike to obtain their own freedom from the world government and fight for the oppressed. However, these two ideologies are both true and false, creating a sort of paradox, as in truth, the world government commits atrocities against mankind, such as slavery, genocide, and even human experimentation, but still protects the general public from pirates and criminals with organizations such as the Marines. And on the other hand, pirates and revolutionaries alike, who have bared witness to these horrific crimes committed by the world government, go on to liberate countries, rescue slaves, and carry out a force of justice of their own, with the majority of these pirates and criminals keeping in line with their branded stereotypes of looting, murdering, and disrupting the general peace of the world. And as you can probably surmise, these entirely different ideologies and thought processes often clash, resulting in war, as we've seen on multiple occasions. And while the Marines and pirates represent the front lines of war and conflict, they're really just the surface, as the power that controls everything by both order and establishment reigning for almost 1,000 years, as the real power of the world is the world's government. The world government is complex, to say the least. Comprising of over 170 nations, the world government becomes a federation of sorts, ruling over these nations with an iron-tight grip. The world government acts, and is no doubt, an extremely powerful organization. But in retrospect, the world government is a relatively new power, as 800 years ago, during a time referred to as the Void Century, the world government did not exist. Instead, we can only presume that the individual nations at this time had their own leaderships, dictators, and hierarchies. And it was towards the end of this mysterious era where the world government was formed, 8 centuries ago, before pirates sailed the seas, except for one example, which we will get to later on in this video. An alliance made up of 20 separate kingdoms founded the world government, establishing an organization to rule over the entire world, superseding countless centuries of human history in which there was no such organization. Thus, the 20 royal families of these kingdoms moved up from their kingdoms atop a place known as the Red Line, a ginormous piece of land stretching all the way up to the heavens and around the entire world. Truly a befitting place of such royalty. They created the Holy Land, a land in which the offspring of these individuals would continue to reside up until the present. And they built Merijois, a castle in which to house the most renowned of figures and their secrets. Inside the castle there lies a throne, an empty throne, to which all 20 kingdoms place down their swords underneath it, serving as a monument signifying shared power, control, and equality amongst themselves, as no single person holds absolute power over the world, or so you would think. However, only 19 swords have been placed underneath the throne, with the missing sword belonging to Queen Lily Nefertari of the Kingdom of Alabasta. During the formation of the world government all those centuries ago, the Kingdom of Alabasta had the opportunity to join the other 19 kingdoms in the newly established Holy Land. But for whatever reason, the Nefertari family did not go. Instead, they chose to remain in the quote-unquote lower world, continuing their rule over the Alabasta kingdom, hence the missing sword. The world government, however, was established nonetheless, and going forward 800 years to the present, still very much operates in the Holy Land, with their ancestors known formally as celestial dragons, or gods, ruling over the world in their stead. The hierarchy of the world government is one of both order and tradition, with the 5 elders at the top sharing their power equally. You can think of these individuals as 5 kings who equally rule over the world. Right below the 5 elders is an elite guard called the Holy Knights, or God's Knights. You can think of these knights as your King's Guard from shows like Game of Thrones. They also have the authority to oversee regular world nobles, and you can presume any other world government official as well. The God's Knights, unlike the common world nobles, are fighters, possessing extraordinary amounts of power. They seem to act as the world government's primary defense. Below them are your run-of-the-mill world nobles, possessing nothing more than a birth certificate. They are ancestors of the founders of the world government and thus are treated like gods. These vile characters, commonly referred to as celestial dragons, are allowed to do whatever they want, whenever they want to. Every single impulsive desire they have will be granted to them on a golden platter. It doesn't matter if it's unjust or severely unethical. And here's where the contradiction lies, the fault of the entire organization as a whole. How can this global power set up to maintain order and uphold justice allow its very own ancestral founders to carry out even more unjust and terrifying crimes against humanity than the people they're meant to be stopping? And below the world nobles are another group called CP0, who act as the world government's spies and serve directly under the world nobles. And not necessarily below, but from here we move on to a branch of the world government, the Marines, the branch directly responsible for upholding justice across the world and punishing the guilty. The Marines consist of a very similar hierarchy to the world government itself, with Kong, who we really haven't seen like at all, serving as the commander-in-chief. And below him is the fleet admiral, Sakazuki, who is really the man in charge, but directly takes orders from the world government itself. And under Sakazuki we have the iconic and renowned 3 admirals, the Marines' greatest fighting force. It is the admirals who would be sent out to any major crisis, etc., like we're seeing at the moment in Egghead with Admiral Kizaru. And below the admirals lie the vice admirals. These individuals don't carry as much authority as the previously mentioned roles, and lack when it comes to fighting power, but they are still a heavily relied upon and involved force in the Marine establishment. That is more or less how the world government operates, except it's not true, as there is one thing which I haven't mentioned yet, a secret so heavily guarded, and for good reason, as if this secret were to ever get out into the public, the entire foundation on which the world government was built, its values, its reputation, its very existence, would crumble to dust. For in reality, the Marines, the nobles, even the 5 elders themselves, are nothing but puppets controlled by a single, silent sovereign, a being who truly should not exist, both physically and definitively. Emu, the secret ruler of the world, the one who sits upon a throne built as a symbol and a reminder that no one person can rule the world, and yet the throne bears the weight of a hidden king. The implications of this revelation are tremendously terrifying. A supreme ruler of the entire world whose existence is unknown, Even the five elders themselves bow and tremble with fear before him or her, as we still don't know the true identity of this figure. But that's not to say that we don't know nothing at all. As confirmed by King Cobra Nefertari, who at the time was the king of Alabasta, said that one of the 20 families who founded the world government were the Nerona family, and there was someone amongst that family named Imu, meaning that this one individual could have potentially been present during the world government's creation 800 years ago during the Void Century. Although it's not confirmed, but it's not impossible, as there is a technique that the world government has made public attempts at retrieving, the Immortal Youth Operation, performed by the wielder of the Op-Op fruit. This technique allows the user to sacrifice their life in return for granting another immortality. This technique wouldn't be a thing unless it was impactful in one way or another, and this assumption is supported by Imu being actually familiar with Nefertari D. Lily and recognizing the extraordinary haki of Joy Boy, which was released during the Egghead arc. Both of these figures were alive during the Void Century. I think it's safe to say that there is a very, very high chance that Imu is the outcome of this technique, or maybe Imu is something else entirely. We do know Imu possesses great power, some sort of transformation that we saw during the events of Cobra's visit and Sabo's intrusion. This transformation could be the result of a devil fruit, but it's very unlikely, as well as Imu, the five elders also possess transformations of their own, and we saw these transformations on Egghead. But there was something missing, something of great importance, as when these transformations were revealed, they were revealed without a devil fruit tag. Any devil fruit user typically has the name of their devil fruit revealed alongside their powers, but with the five elders, there was no tag. And to add even more terrifying confluences to the fact that Imu possesses a power that is not a result of a devil fruit is the fact that there exists something called the Abyss. The Abyss is something the world government, probably Imu, possesses, allowing world government figures to teleport. We saw the Abyss in Egghead and Elbath, with the five elders teleporting from the throne room in Marijua to Egghead Island, and Figurlin Shamrock and Gunko teleporting from presumably Marijua as well to Elbath. Now what's interesting about said Abyss is the fact that it doesn't really seem like a devil fruit power at all. We have seen countless devil fruits displayed in the show, from common Paramecias to mythical Zoans, and yet not a single fruit bears any sort of resemblance towards the Abyss or any of the five elders' transformations. Teleportation, instant regeneration, and of course what appears to be an awakened Zoan can't all be the outcomes of the same devil fruit. And to discuss one final event, an event that genuinely may confirm this, is the outcome of Saint Saturn. Saint Saturn, unlike the rest of the Gorosei, physically travelled to Egghead in order to kill Dr. Vegapunk. The other Gorosei members were teleported back to the Holy Land when the tremendous outburst of Haki was released by Emmet. But Saint Saturn remained, and for whatever reason, Imu sensed this massive fluctuation of Haki all the way over in the Holy Land, as Imu began to curse Joy Boy's name. This could only mean that Imu is somehow linked to the five elders. Imu very well might have bequeathed some of his or her power to the Gorosei personally. And this is somewhat confirmed later on, when Imu brutally murders Saint Saturn for failing his mission from all the way back in the Holy Land, as Saturn crumples to dust and bone in seconds. And you may be wondering, why were the five elders dispatched to Egghead in the first place? And what is this power Saint Saturn spoke of with his dying words, along with this Joy Boy character Imu blamed for the escape? Now Imu and the very mysterious power surrounding him, and this Joy Boy character, are subject to countless debates amongst the community. But there are answers to all of these questions, answers that lie 800 years ago, during a time period commonly referred to as the Void Century. The Void Century is a period in history that's 900 to 800 years ago, a period completely shrouded in mystery, which is weird considering that the events of this period are so important that its outcomes changed the world forever. However, it's not shrouded in mystery from any natural means. In fact, it's shrouded by design by the world government. Independent research into this period of time is considered one of the worst crimes you can ever commit, of course by order of the world government itself. But this begs the question, well, why? Why are the world government going to such lengths and taking such drastic action against independent parties for conducting research into the Void Century? It's as if they're hiding something so absurd they orchestrated a genocide of an entire civilization and sent a Navy admiral and one of the 5 elders with over 100 ships just to kill one man who also conducted research into it. And while we know the world government is hiding something, as we actually do have some information regarding the Void Century, information that lies in the shape of giant square objects known as poneglyphs that have engraved into them transcripted information of the Void Century. We know from these poneglyphs, and in correlation with Dr. Vegapunk's speech, that during the Void Century there was a great war. There was an ancient kingdom that possessed extremely advanced technology, even more advanced than anything of the present. And it was this great kingdom that would go on to oppose 20 other kingdoms, and it's these kingdoms that would go on to eventually form the world government. This war, of course, ultimately led to the formation of the world government and the complete destruction of said kingdom, along with the entire physical state of the world. We know that sea levels across the entire world rose by 200 meters, sinking all of the continents, islands, and civilizations that once existed straight to the bottom of the sea. The islands and countries we are all so very familiar with are merely the mountaintop of these once great continents. Dr. Vegapunk, the world's greatest scientist, conducted research into this period of time, but he didn't only conduct research, as using scientific processes, Vegapunk was able to deduce that the extreme rise of sea levels were not the outcome of any natural causes. 100 years is not nearly enough time for anything of this caliber to occur naturally, concluding that it was the result of so-called ancient weapons. The ancient weapons are 3 weapons of immense mass destruction, which date back to the Void Century. There are 3 ancient weapons: Pluton, which we know is buried under the land of Wano, Poseidon being Shirahoshi, and one more named Uranus. These weapons are hugely sought after considering their capabilities. In fact, one of the first arcs in the series was a result of a man known as Crocodile trying to obtain one of these so-called ancient weapons, only to fail due to Luffy's interference. I don't intend to get into any really speculative discussions regarding the Void Century. I'll keep any of that for theory videos in the future. I only want to divulge what is known about the Void Century and other topics as well, which in retrospect really isn't that much. There are a few topics I would like to discuss, however, relating to the Void Century, with the first being a name, the name of D, or specifically something called the Will of D. As throughout the entire world, there are those who possess a D in their name. It is still unknown the exact meaning behind this name, but the 5 elders and world nobles alike greatly fear this name. It is even taught as a childhood story that the D will bring about a storm, or if you misbehave, you will be eaten up by D, so on and so forth. And funnily enough, this name has another name, which we learned from Corazon: the natural enemies of gods. Now, if this refers to the name of the self-proclaimed gods living in the Holy Land, or other beings entirely, is a different story altogether. But nonetheless, those bearing the name D were enemies of the 20 kingdoms all those years ago. Examples of this name tend to reside within relevant and powerful characters in the story, such as Gold D. Roger, Marshall D. Teach, and of course, Monkey D. Luffy. People with this name all tend to share passionate and, quite frankly, borderline obsessive desires for freedom and their own ambitions. But what really intrigues me the most about the Void Century is the apparent technology which existed. I keep asking myself how many people had to have died for technology as a whole to not only stop advancing, but to actually revert. Dr. Vegapunk possesses the brain fruit, which allows him to possess an infinite amount of knowledge, but even he cannot replicate the technology of the ancient kingdom. But it's not just the technology of the ancient kingdom that he can't replicate, it's the power source they possessed. The ancient kingdom seemed to have possessed an infinite power source. Vegapunk did try his hand at recreating such a thing, and ended up creating something called the Mother Flame, an incomplete version. It was created to provide an unlimited source of energy, meant to completely change and modernize civilization in general. But it was also used for something else, as a piece of it was stolen and gifted to the world government, who used it to power up an ancient weapon, probably Uranus. but still unconfirmed. The world government then used this weapon alongside the piece of the Mother Flame to eradicate the entire country of Lelouchia off the face of the planet entirely. And it worked, as Lelouchia is no more. Only a giant crater remains. But interestingly enough, as a result of the decimation of Lelouchia, sea levels across the world rose. This acts as a confluence to what Vegapunk said about the Void Century and the ancient weapons previously. But what if I were to tell you that alongside Imu, there was another character, a character arguably even more important to the story than Imu? And this character's name is Joy Boy, the first pirate in history. Joy Boy was a man who lived during the Void Century, who resided from the Great Kingdom. Joy Boy may just be the single most important character in the story. Every single major world event seems to always link back to Joy Boy. And of course we can't forget his treasure as well, but we'll get to that later. Joy Boy's story is still one of mystery. However, we do know that during his life, he became comrades of both Zunesha and Emmett, the robot from Egghead, respectively. However, Joy Boy and his faction would eventually be defeated by the 20 Kingdoms 800 years ago, and thus the Void Century occurs. But even though Joy Boy was defeated, he still never stopped fighting. In fact, it seems like either he knew he would eventually be defeated, or he at least considered it, as he sealed some of his own hockey inside of Emmett, knowing that he would be around far longer than he would be. This would also perfectly coincide with the creation of the poneglyphs and of course the One Piece. There's also one more thing to add, and it's an addition of the ancient weapons, as for whatever reason Joy Boy made an attempt at preserving these ancient weapons for future generations to inherit. This really does make you wonder if Joy Boy knew all along that his era would end without his success. But by trying to preserve the ancient weapons and leaving behind the One Piece for future generations, it seems that in the process Joy Boy left his own generation behind, as there was a promise Joy Boy failed to fulfill. Back in Fishman Island, Nico Robin found a message writ upon a poneglyph. The message was a letter of apology from Joy Boy himself, as he had broken an unknown promise to the people of Fishman Island. The promise probably went unfulfilled due to Joy Boy's eventual defeat. But this was only one of the various messages and info texts scattered around the world in the form of poneglyphs. There are three different types of poneglyphs. Historical poneglyphs, which reveal fragments of the ancient history once lost. Instructional poneglyphs, which contain clues or instructions to other poneglyphs and ancient weapons. And of course the extremely sought after road poneglyphs. Possessing a different color altogether, these poneglyphs are the very keys to Joy Boy's treasure. Collecting all four of these renowned poneglyphs would allow one to reach Laugh Tale. Joy Boy seems to also possess a very similar resemblance to our one and only Monkey D. Luffy. Even while being shown as a mere silhouette, he still possesses the iconic straw hat. But there is also another resemblance, a very mythical and iconic resemblance both, as Joy Boy was also in possession of the Hito Hito no Mi model Nika, a mythical Zoan devil fruit, allowing him to become the reincarnation of the sun god Nika, the exact same as Luffy. Although the full extent of Joy Boy's appearance and powers is still left shrouded in mystery, it is an undeniable fact that Joy Boy was strong, so strong that 20 entire kingdoms needed to band together to defeat him. Joy Boy's ancient haki alone fluctuated with such intensity that it was able to cancel the abilities of 4 of the Gorosei and knock out almost every marine soldier on Egghead Island completely unconscious, including Vice Admirals, who even possess haki themselves. I really do wish for the sake of this video that I could elaborate more on Joy Boy, considering just how important he is to the story. But there is one more thing of great importance, something Joy Boy left behind for another to inherit. At some point during the Void Century, Joy Boy came across an island located at the very end of the Grand Line. There he left behind something of unimaginable value, the One Piece. By nature, the One Piece has become a legend in the present world, inherited by Roger, and with his dying words, Roger drove countless souls to the seas, in pursuit of dreams greater than they'd ever dared to imagine. A dream to find the One Piece and become the next king of the pirates. However, with Roger's final waltz, where he single-handedly invoked the Great Pirate Era, meant that every sort of character would dream of attaining this legendary treasure and title alike, meaning that the one who finds it now might not be the person Joy Boy intended to find it. Only the members of the Roger Pirates know what the One Piece is, and once they arrived on the elusive final island of the Grand Line, what they found was so hilarious that they all burst into laughter, with Roger ultimately naming the final island Laugh Tale. But decades would pass after Roger's departure and no one managed to find it. The dreams pirates once shared of finding Roger's treasure would slowly start to die out. But during the War of the Best, just like Roger, with Whitebeard's dying words, he reignited the pirate era once more. The flames of ambition pirates shared had never burnt so bright following that day. Whitebeard also mentioned that a great battle will occur after the One Piece is found again, a war that would embroil the seas far and wide. Dr. Vegapunk also mentioned that the entire fate of the world rests on whoever lays claim to the One Piece. We do know in fact that the One Piece contains the true history of the world, or remnants at least. We know this because Roger and his crew obviously learned the true history of the world once they found the One Piece. This is further supported by Roger naming the island Laugh Tale, as in tale or a story. And yeah, that's about it for this video. If you did make it this far, thank you so much for watching, and consider liking and subscribing, as it really does help out the channel a lot. Also, if I missed anything or got anything wrong, please let me know down in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.